The Porsche 911 Turbo that Will Smith drove through Miami in 1995 wasn't supposed to be the star of the film. But somewhere between the first camera roll and the last chase sequence, it became one of the most recognizable cars in 90s action cinema. Then it disappeared. Not into a museum, not into a celebrity collection, not onto an auction block with a velvet rope and a certified appraisal. It just vanished. And the story of where it went and what it went through is stranger and more interesting than anything that happened to it on screen. Hi, my name is Johnny, and this is American Muscle. What Bad Boys was and why it mattered. To understand what the Porsche meant, you need to understand what Bad Boys was, because in 1995, nobody saw it coming. The film was produced by Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, the same team that had already given the world Flashdance, Beverly Hills Cop, Top Gun, and The Rock. If you wanted loud, fast, and visually aggressive cinema in the 80s and 90s, you called Simpson and Bruckheimer. They were the architects of the high-concept action film, and Bad Boys was their attempt to bring that formula to a buddy cop format, with a Miami backdrop and two leads who, on paper, had no business carrying a $200 million franchise. Will Smith was coming off 6 seasons of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He had 6 degrees of separation, and where the day takes you on his resume. He was a television star with serious ambitions and enough charm to light up a room from 50 yards. Martin Lawrence had his own show, was known for stand-up, and had done House Party and Boomerang. Neither of them had ever carried a major studio action film. The studios knew it, the budget reflected it. Bad Boys was made for $23 million, which even by 1995 standards was lean for a Bruckheimer production. The director was a 30-year-old music video and commercial director named Michael Bay, who had never made a feature film in his life. I want you to sit with that for a second. $23 million, 2 television stars, and a first-time director. On paper, this is not the recipe for a franchise that's still going 30 years later. What Bay brought to the project was a visual grammar he had spent years developing in advertising and music videos. Fast cuts, low angles, saturated color, the camera always moving, always finding the most dynamic frame possible. Miami and Bay's hands became something almost operatic. The light, the water, the architecture, the cars. Everything was pushed a little further than it needed to be, and that excess became the style. You either bought into it or you didn't, and enough people bought into it that Bad Boys grossed $141 million worldwide against that $23 million budget. It made Will Smith a movie star. It put Michael Bay on a trajectory toward Armageddon and Transformers, and it gave the world Mike Lowry, a Miami narcotics detective with a 9-figure trust fund, a waterfront apartment, and a Porsche 911 Turbo that he absolutely should not have been driving on a detective's salary, which was, of course, entirely the point. What the Porsche 911 Turbo actually was. Let's talk about the car itself, because the 933 generation Porsche 911 Turbo is not a car that needs a film to justify its reputation. It had already built one of its own. The 933 designation covers the turbocharged variants of the 911 produced between 1975 and 1998. The car used in Bad Boys is a 1994 model, finished in black, which in retrospect feels almost too perfect for the character. The engine is a 3.6-liter air-cooled flat 6 mounted in the rear, turbocharged, producing 355 horsepower and 384 pound-feet of torque through a 5-speed manual gearbox. 0 to 60 in 4.6 seconds. Top speed in the neighborhood of 180 miles per hour. Now, I want to be precise about something here, because the 933 Turbo has a reputation that goes beyond the numbers. This was not a forgiving car. The turbocharged flat 6 had what engineers politely called significant turbo lag, meaning you'd press the throttle, nothing would happen for a moment, and then 355 horsepower would arrive all at once, mostly going to the rear wheels, while the engine's weight behind the rear axle was simultaneously trying to rotate the car around its own axis. Porsche drivers of the era called it the Widowmaker. That is not a nickname a car earns by being easy to live with. The list price in 1994 was approximately $110,000. For context, the median household income in the United States in 1994 was $32,000. Mike Lowry was driving 3.5 years of the average American's gross income to work every morning. The car did the character establishment work before the screenplay had to. Visually, the 933 is one of the most recognizable silhouettes in automotive history. The wide-body rear haunches, the whale-tail spoiler, the hood that slopes down over that flat front end. It doesn't look like anything else on the road because nothing else is. It's aggressive without being ostentatious, expensive without being flashy, or, well, it's actually very flashy. But it earns it. Production sourced the car for the film through standard channels. Porsche Cars. North America had a long-standing relationship with Hollywood Productions. The brand understood the marketing value of screen time, particularly in high-profile releases, and Bad Boys with a Bruckheimer stamp and a Columbia Pictures distribution deal was high-profile enough to get attention. The exact terms of the placement have never been publicly detailed. But the arrangement was almost certainly a promotional loan, the same structure Ford used for the Lightning trucks in The Fast and the Furious 6 years later, which, as we will get to shortly, is directly relevant to what happened to the car after filming wrapped. What the car did during filming. Principal photography on Bad Boys took place in Miami in 1994, shooting on location across the city with a production that was, by most accounts, organized chaos from start to finish. The film's now legendary production circumstances have been well documented. Smith and Lawrence had genuine chemistry from the first day, but no defined characters. The script had been rewritten multiple times. The famous opening scene, the two detectives bickering in the Porsche about fast food and personal space, was largely improvised. Bay was shooting fast, moving fast, and working with two leads who were making a lot of decisions in real time. The car was in nearly every scene where Smith's character needed to be established as the one with money, style, and a completely different relationship to the job than his partner. The key sequences involving the Porsche are the opening drive, which sets the entire character dynamic of the film, the street chase sequences through Miami, and several static scenes where the car functions as essentially a rolling set piece, establishing Lowry's world against Lawrence's Marcus Burnett and his minivan family existence. That contrast, by the way, is the entire film in two vehicles. One man's life is a black Porsche 911 Turbo. The other man's life is a Dodge Caravan. The movie writes itself. For the driving sequences, production typically used multiple vehicles. A hero car for close-ups, interior work, and anything requiring the camera to be inside or immediately alongside. Stunt cars for the sequences that put the vehicle at genuine risk. The standard practice you see in every major production. Accounts from the shoot suggest at least 2 933 turbos were on set, though the exact number has never been confirmed in any official production documentation I have been able to verify. We'll come back to why that matters. Bay shot Miami the way he shoots everything, like he's afraid the city will stop being beautiful if he slows down. The car on those streets, under that light, with that soundtrack, is one of the more genuinely cinematic automotive moments of the decade. And then filming wrapped and the questions start. What people think happened? Here is where we need to pause and clear some things up, because the internet has been wrong about this car for 30 years, and it is time someone said so directly. Forum threads going back to the early 2000s have claimed, with varying degrees of confidence, that Will Smith purchased the hero car from the production and kept it. This is a great story. It fits the character, it fits Smith's public persona, and it would make for a very satisfying ending. It is also, as far as anyone has been able to document, not true. There is no record of a private sale to Smith. No auction record, no insurance filing, no estate documentation, no statement from Smith himself confirming it. The claim appears to have originated in the same way most movie car mythology originates. Someone assumed it must have happened and said so online, and then someone else repeated it, and then it became the version of the story everyone knows. The second popular theory is that the car was destroyed during production. Also not confirmed, given that the sequences involving the Porsche are not especially destructive compared to, say, everything that happens in the same film to the various police vehicles. This one never had much evidence behind it. What the documented record suggests is considerably less cinematic and considerably more typical. Post-production fate. When Bad Boys wrapped in 1994, and the film went into post-production, the vehicles that had been used in the shoot were processed according to standard industry practice. And standard industry practice, as anyone who has followed movie car history knows, is the enemy of preservation. If the 933 Turbo was sourced as a promotional loan from Porsche Cars North America, which is the most likely scenario given the production budget and the brand relationship, then it would have been returned to Porsche at the conclusion of filming. No different from the Ford Lightning trucks going back to Ford after the Fast and the Furious. The manufacturer takes their vehicles back, processes them through whatever internal channels they use for pre-owned promotional units, and the cars re-enter the marketplace. Sometimes they go to dealer lots, sometimes they go to fleet auctions, sometimes they go directly to private buyers through Porsche's own certified pre-owned program. In any of those scenarios, the car that rolled off a Miami street in a Michael Bay film in 1994 becomes, in the eyes of the paperwork, a used Porsche 911 Turbo with some mileage on it and a production history that nobody thought to document. No VIN flag, no provenance certificate, no note in the file saying this specific vehicle appeared in a Columbia Pictures release directed by Michael Bay and is therefore worth preserving. This is the brutal reality of automotive film history, and I will never stop being angry about it. A costume from Bad Boys is sitting in a climate-controlled archive somewhere. The script pages are in a vault. The call sheets, the production stills, the continuity notes, all preserved. The car, the single most visually iconic object in the entire film, got treated like a lease return. By the mid-2000s, the 933 Turbo market had shifted considerably. Values were climbing. Collectors who had bought these cars in the late 90s as used Porsches were beginning to realize what they had. And somewhere in that population of 933 Turbos that had passed through multiple owners with incomplete histories, at least one of them had a story that nobody knew. The trail, at this point, is genuinely cold. Not dramatically cold, not cold in the way of a stolen car or a mysterious disappearance. Cold in the most ordinary and frustrating way possible. The paperwork got lost, the owners changed, the story got forgotten, and a car that meant something on screen became invisible off it. Hollywood and the cars. It throws away. Here is the thing that gets me every single time I go down one of these rabbit holes, and I go down a lot of them, trust me. My search history is a cry for help. Hollywood is extraordinarily good at preserving some things, and catastrophically, almost aggressively indifferent to others. The infrastructure the industry has built around archiving its own output is genuinely impressive. Film negatives in climate-controlled vaults, production documents cataloged and stored, wardrobe preserved behind glass in museum exhibitions. The script pages from a major studio release will outlast most of the people who wrote them. Licensing divisions exist specifically to protect and monetize the cultural output of productions that wrapped decades ago. The industry understands at an institutional level that what it makes has lasting value, and that lasting value is worth protecting. And then there are the cars. The 1969 Charger from Dirty Mary Crazy. Larry is sitting in a residential backyard in Sun Valley, California, right now. Not a museum. Not a private collection with a temperature-controlled garage and a restoration budget. A backyard. Someone drives past it on their way to work without knowing what it is. One of the SVT Lightning trucks from the first of Fast and the Furious came within a single day of being completely parted out before Furious Garage tracked it down and pulled it back from the edge. The Cobra Mercury that Eddie Paul built for Sylvester Stallone, all four of them, including the hero car, the one Stallone personally owned and drove on screen, were sold to a junkyard when production on Cobra wrapped a junkyard. I will never fully make my peace with that sentence. At a certain point, you have to stop calling these individual oversights and start recognizing them as a structural feature of how the industry processes its own materials. Vehicles are classified as production tools. When production ends, tools get returned to their owners or disposed of through whatever channel costs the least. The cultural significance embedded in those tools at that point becomes somebody else's problem, and nobody in 30 years of watching this happen repeatedly has ever satisfactorily determined whose problem it actually is. The Porsche from Bad Boys fits this pattern with the kind of precision that makes you want to sit down and stare at a wall for a while. In 1994, nobody on that production knew they were making the first chapter of a franchise that would still be releasing sequels in the 2020s. They were making a mid-budget action film in Miami Heat on a compressed schedule with a first-time director and 2 television stars. Preservation was not a conversation anyone was having. It never is. That is exactly the problem. What it tells us about the original Bad Boys. 2 came out in 2003. 8 years after the original, Will Smith was no longer a television star with movie ambitions. He was one of the biggest draws on the planet, fresh off Alley, Men in Black 2, and a run of commercial dominance that made him, for a specific window in the early 2000s, essentially uncatchable. The budget reflected it. 23 million became 130 million. Everything got scaled up. The action, the set pieces, the runtime, the explosions. Michael Bay, if you can believe it, was given even more money to be Michael Bay. And yes, before you ask, I do think that is both impressive and slightly terrifying, including the car. Mike Lowry, in the sequel, drives a Ferrari 360 Modena. Gone is the 933 Turbo. In its place, a mid-engine Italian supercar that in 2003 represented the absolute pinnacle of what aspirational car culture looked like on screen. The message required no translation. The franchise got upgraded. The hero got upgraded. Even his parking spot got upgraded. Here is what I find genuinely interesting about that decision, though. The replacement tells you more about the original than the original ever told you about itself. The 933 Turbo wasn't just transportation for Mike Lowry, it was a costume. A very specific, very deliberate statement about who this man was at that exact moment in time. 1995, Miami. Young, sharp, a little dangerous, the kind of cool that only existed in that decade and cannot be reproduced without looking like a costume party. The Porsche belonged to that moment the way the Ferrari belongs to a different one entirely. Both are correct, both are intentional, and the gap between them is 8 years of franchise growth that nobody predicted when Bay was improvising dialogue on a Miami street with 2 television actors and a borrowed Porsche. But upgrades carry a cost that nobody talks about. When the Ferrari showed up, the Porsche became the old car, and old cars, in Hollywood's institutional memory, have a reliable and deeply frustrating way of becoming nobody's responsibility. The sequel erased the original car's active cultural role the moment it replaced it. What had been the defining object of the franchise's visual identity became a footnote, a first chapter detail. Something you mention in a bracket when you're explaining the sequel to someone who hasn't seen the original. That is how you lose a car. Not all at once. Gradually. And then completely. Mike Lowry and the Porsche as character. Let's talk about what the car was actually doing in that film, beyond being a very attractive object for Michael Bay's camera to orbit. Mike Lowry is a contradiction wrapped in a Tom Ford suit. He's a Miami narcotics detective, which is a job that pays somewhere around $45,000 a year. He lives in a waterfront apartment. He wears clothes that cost more than most people's rent. He drives a Porsche 911 Turbo. The film gives you the explanation early. The trust fund, the family money, the wealth that has nothing to do with the job. But the car is where you feel it before the script explains it. The 933 Turbo in 1995 was a specific kind of status object. Not a Ferrari, which would read as ostentation. Not a Lamborghini, which would read as a certain kind of vulgarity. The 90s were complicated about Lamborghinis. A Porsche 911 Turbo read as taste. As someone who understood cars, not just someone who could afford them. Lowry's Porsche said he was the kind of man who knew exactly what he was doing with his money and his life, which is the precise opposite of everything Marcus Burnett represents in the same film. Will Smith, for what it's worth, has never pretended to be anything other than a genuine car enthusiast. His personal collection over the years has included multiple Porsches, a Bugatti Veyron, and vehicles across a range that suggests someone who actually cares about the machines rather than just the image. Whether that enthusiasm informed his performance in the car, the way he sits in it, the way he drives it in the improvisational opening scene, is impossible to prove. But it doesn't look like a man pretending to be comfortable in a Porsche. It looks like a man who is comfortable in a Porsche. Where it might be now, and the unsolved mystery. Here is where I have to be straight with you, because this channel does not deal in invented happy endings. The current location of the hero car from Bad Boys is not confirmed. There is no documented chain of custody from the production's end to a known present-day owner. No auction record with verified screen use provenance. No museum display. No celebrity collection announcement. If the car exists in screen-accurate condition in private hands, the owner either doesn't know what they have or has chosen not to publicize it. Both of those outcomes are entirely plausible. What I can tell you is that a 1994 Porsche 911 Turbo in black that passed through a Bruckheimer production in Miami and came back to Porsche through fleet channels in late 1994 or early 95 would today be a genuinely significant collector car. 933 turbos have appreciated substantially. The good ones, low mileage, documented history, clean chassis, are selling north of $200,000. A verified screen-used example from one of the most commercially successful action films of the decade would be having a very different conversation at auction. We are talking provenance that collectors dream about. If it's out there, it's waiting. And if somebody with a 1994 black 933 Turbo with an interesting history is watching this, the comment section is open and I am very easy to reach. 446 horsepower, 4.6 seconds to 60, $110,000 in 1994, 3 decades of franchise history launched from the driver's seat. And somewhere right now, maybe in a garage in South Florida, maybe on a dealer lot in California, maybe in a private collection whose owner has no idea, is a black Porsche 911 Turbo with a story that Hollywood forgot to write down. The Dirty Mary Charger is in a Sun Valley backyard. The Cobra Mercury spent 17 years stolen and came home through a lawsuit that opened with a line from the film. The Lightning trucks almost got parted out before anyone knew what they were. The industry has a long and distinguished history of losing exactly the things it should have kept. The Bad Boys Porsche fits the pattern with the kind of precision that makes you want to go knock on some doors in Miami. If this one hit different, drop a comment below with where you think the car ended up. And subscribe to American Muscle. We chase these stories down, and we are just getting started. See you in the next lane.